Good evening, Edwin. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for taking this time to be with us. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened in the last week of February 2023?
Bindu, first of all, thank you very much for having me and for the opportunity to have a logical closure to the entire episode that has happened. So let's reel back to last week of February 2023. I think it will benefit my fellow parents if I gave a context that led to February 2023. The context was that if you look at the WhatsApp messages all the way through the last week of January 2023, I have the head of school telling me how much a pleasure it is for her to work with me and to have me as a mentor. Then on the 26th of January 2023, the Republic Day for the country, was the first time I seriously started to doubt whether everything was all right. Because I went to school for the flag hoisting and I found there was not a single teacher. The only people in the flag hoisting were the staff, the housekeeping staff. Breakfast had been organized for the entire community, and the only person that landed up there was the head of school, Geeta, and she was very cold. And as soon as the flag hoisting was done, she said she has to leave, and she left. And I did later on that day. In fact, there are mail traffic that I'm sure that Yadav and Rashmi can provide you. But I wrote to her and once said, I would like to understand why this happens, because if there's one thing that we all have to keep in mind is the loyalty to our flag and to our country.
Sure.
And the example set of this to our children. And I reminded her that this was my desire in August when all the teachers came. I said, wouldn't it be nice to have somebody from Studco coming in, actually raising the flag and singing the national anthem?
Right.
And she wrote back to me and said, well, there's no process to that, but if you so desire, I'll put a process to it. And then I said, okay, that's fine. We should talk about it in the board meeting. And that's the first time I realized something was not right. That something was happening that we weren't seeing. And the next thing that happened was I called for a board meeting because there was this preparation we needed to do for the CIS NIASC audit. And as part of that board meeting, I wanted an inventory of a performance and a report for the school. And it was also the time when we had to confirm her. So I actually set about setting a template for her and I sent it to her. And I told her, ma'am, if you could please prepare on this template and provide us comprehensive view, because you haven't provided one since the day you joined.
Right.
So can you please provide this? And it was a very well done, professionally done framework in which she had to report. She wrote back to me and said, well, I can't do it because I don't have time. We got just another week for the board meeting and we don't have time. I told her, that is the problem. I'm going to move the board meeting by another week. And it'll give you the time to prepare for this because it's important that we do it. Because there are so many burning issues happening in school. The board needs to understand how you are pursuing each one of them. And the next thing I know is on that fateful Thursday or Friday, I can't recall, I'm told that she resigned.
Right.
I was in college and I was in my work spot. And somebody called me to tell me, have you seen your mail? She seems, the HOS has resigned. And that's when I saw it. And it's all part of the read logs and everybody knows that to be true. So somewhere around 11:30, I saw that she had resigned. I called her. Her phone was switched off. I kept calling her. I sent messages, but she refused to answer. And by that time, I think the frenzy had already started. And nobody was willing to listen to anybody in terms of what happened. Throughout the weekend, we tried getting in touch with her. But she was not available. She didn't return calls. She didn't respond to emails. And then I heard on Sunday that she was going to meet some parents on Monday. And I said, this is funny because if she's not talking to the chairman, but she's going to be meeting with parents, what is happening over here? On Monday, when she got back to work, I once again tried to talk to her and to no avail.
Are you saying she
fact-
didn't meet with you, Edwin?
She didn't meet with me, Bindu. She didn't meet with me. She didn't talk to me. She didn't tell me she was resigning. She didn't give me a chance to understand what drove her resignation. It almost appeared that she had decided she'd resign. And obviously somebody had said, we'll take this and we'll create such a mess out of it. And there was no pathway to conversation. None.
That's stunning. There seems to be a deep-seated hatred between the board members and certain people on the other side. What is all this hatred about?
See, you got to go back to the earlier board of 2019. If you look at the board of 2019, we came in at a time that was extremely difficult, and everyone in that board worked extremely hard, including Sai, to get the school back on track. When that interim board went into the election mode, there were a number of parents and a lot of staff in the school that said that Sai was not being very kind to them in the way he interacted with them. And no matter how much we tried, Sai did lost that election. He couldn't win that election.
Right.
Somewhere, I think Sai believes we were responsible for him not winning. It's my conjecture. I could be totally wrong. Okay, I could be entirely wrong. But maybe he did. Maybe that's where he said, look, this board has not stood by me when I've done so much for them. Personally, between him and I don't think we had any problems at all. Was there a challenge between him and Yadav? There was always a difficult situation between the two of them. But I wouldn't call that as hatred to the board. It seemed that there was some relationships that were not strong enough. Some were almost neutral. So I don't know whether there was deep-seated hatred between the board and the other side. Even today, I think, Bindu, it's very difficult for me to understand what is the motivation on the other side. They've done what they did. With all of my experience, with all of my education, with all the intellect that I can summon, I am at a loss to understand what is it that caused somebody to reach a point where this is almost like a battle to death.
Right.
It just beats me. I have no clue. And if you use the word hatred, it seems it's what it is. But I can tell you that from a board perspective, I can speak for everyone in the board. I don't think at any point of time there's hatred. In fact, it's part of the initial meeting, the very first meeting that we had after the board elections when Rishi and Vijay came in. I spent 30 minutes in the very first board meeting telling them that from now on, we are not two sides of an election. We are one board that is committed to doing good for the school. And I told them that as far as I'm concerned, as chairman of the board, I'd ensure that we would be unified. But somehow, through the entire tenure, every board meeting, I had always had Rishi, and I always had Vijay wanting to find out how they could disrupt the board meeting. It wasn't to me, it would always be on the other side. I mean, Vijaya was there. She would be a good person to reference to find out what exactly happened in those board meetings. So, it really, I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss to understand what is it that happened that has caused this almost fight to death kind of environment.
Yeah, I think it's perplexing to all of us who have been watching this for the last almost 100 days, because we can't seem to put our finger on the motive, and we also can't seem to understand, I for one can't seem to understand the role that Rishi and Vijay have played, because 276 pages worth of it tells us that everything that you guys discuss, practically everything that you guys discuss, was being discussed, over casually, over perhaps a drink or at the dining table in somebody else's house. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Can you go ahead with that question once again, Bindu?
Yeah.
I lost it.
Yeah, so I just said that it is appalling to all of us who've been watching this for the last 100 days. And then having read those WhatsApp chats, 276 pages worth of it, that Rishi and Vijay were leaking all this data to different people. Please tell us a little bit. You said they were disrupting all your board meetings right from the get-go. Can you give us a little bit of information or an instance perhaps that we can understand that better?
Let's take an example of one item, for example. Yeah, it'll probably even talk to one of other things that you may have in your mind as you progress. But somewhere in the month of November, I talked about the need to start building a succession plan for the board. Yeah, because I knew it was my last year. I know that the key position in the board would be the leadership of the board, which is the chairman. And I said, I need to find a way to unearth talent in the school that would be willing to serve the board. And I felt one of the ways that we're going to do it is to be able to create subcommittees.
Right.
And my perspective of subcommittee was a subcommittee would be an advisory to the board. There would be a subcommittee for finance. There would be a subcommittee for the infrastructure and so on and so forth.
Interesting.
The people who protested the most about allowing parents to have that power was Rishi.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what good we did, what bad we did. It almost seemed that we came to every board meeting with an intent to disrupt. Whatever the topic, it didn't matter. Whatever the topic, whether the topic was simple things or the topic was difficult topics, but they never once contributed to say, let's think about this together. There was always a you versus I. And there were many times that I kept reminding them that there are instances of information leaving the boardroom. And they would get extremely, almost violent in the argument, saying, are you suspecting us? I said, no, I am not. I'm only saying that the information is leaving this boardroom, and I can talk for the other four that have served on the board with me for many years. It's not coming from them. So we need to ask ourselves who it is coming from. And they would drum up the righteous anger and say that, are you trying to insult us? Are you trying to accuse us? Say, no matter how calm you are, and say, no, we're not. But now we know it's true.
Yeah, it's all true. It's all true.
Right? It's
So,
all true.
yeah, moving to another topic. Were you instrumental in bringing Geetha back to BIS as HOS?
Absolutely. So let's lay it out. So when we took over, it's important now that the parents understand this. When we took over in 2019, we took over in a situation where the school had gone through some extremely difficult situations. And when I sat down to analyze that together with my colleagues there on the board, we came up with 3 reasons why the school was going through this. And this is important because you'll find this is to be a repeating theme even now. At 2019, there was an absence of an active board, and they were not involved in the governance nor the management of the school and the trust. This is 2019, I'm talking about before we took over.
Right.
The second problem was there was an absence of formal documented processes and controls on both financial and operational management. The third problem was that we had a HOS at that time who had no hesitation in crossing boundaries that pertain to her authority, her role. Okay.
This is Monga
Now,
you're talking about.
That's right. Therefore, when the new board took over, we made sure to put in place measures to address each of the above.
Right.
Okay. And then we brought in a new HOS. And that new HOS had to be shepherded to go through it. Now, as we went deeper and deeper into it, you can imagine that we almost spent every day in school as we helped to bring the school to stability, helping the HOS to get integrated into the staff, and the staff are not accepting her very well. And we're hoping that will come a time when the HOS will take over and we could step back. But the more we tried, the less that happened.
So you're saying the staff
fact,
didn't accept her?
Not the staff, I'm talking about the HOS.
Yeah, I understand.
She just wasn't able to take over the reins.
Right.
She was not willing to take over authority. She kept pushing things back to the board and saying, you decide for me. And the more we told her you need to decide, the more she did not. And then we made that we got brought ahead of academics.
Hmm.
And now when you look at it in retrospect, we have the head of school that was unwilling to take responsibilities, and we had a head of academics that was more than happy to take authority, and there was no balance.
Right.
And it reached a point where there was an extreme authority moved to the academic head, and the head of school was not willing to take any of this authority. So we started thinking and said, we need to change the situation. And we said, we need to start looking for somebody from the outside.
So are you
At
telling
that
me
point in
that,
time,
sorry to interrupt, if I understand this right, are you saying that very early on in Miss Geeta's tenure, you were already looking for a replacement for her?
not Geeta's, I'm talking about
Miss Rupa.
Miss Rupa Sen.
Right, sorry, my
We
bad.
said we need to find somebody.
Right.
And while we started that search, Sunil came in and said, look, there is Geeta. And she's left the school with a great amount of reputation and love for teachers and popularity. And even Mr. Hanif vouched for her personally to me. He said, you can't make a mistake with a person like this. I got into calls with her because Sunil had no locus standi on this, right? He had left the board. So I ran all of the conversations with Geeta. I answered all her questions. I understood her philosophies. I had multiple calls to help understand our philosophies and vision for the school. And finally, she agreed to take over the school. Yes, so the answer to the question is, I was deeply invested in recruiting her in. I was deeply convinced, based on everything that Sunil said and everybody else said about her past tenure, that she was indeed going to be a great asset for the school. I always had one question that I posed. And that one question was, see, I look at her resume and I look at her capabilities, and everything you tell about me is great. And whenever I recruit people, I said, what am I missing? Because there's no perfect human being. And I came up to a point where I said, there's only one thing missing with her. She does not have a scholarly pedigree.
Okay.
She hasn't excelled in a subject. She used to be a counselor. She used to speech council science, and then she went to do her MBA. So I asked them, where is the scholarly anchor? But everybody assured me that she was extremely scholarly, that she understood running the school, and we should just not worry about that. I didn't. I said, fair enough. If you guys all think that she's the best, we'll take her.
Right.
And so for me, when I look at everything that happened, I take it as my personal failures, that I once again found somebody that not necessarily, when you look back and count everything done, was the best for the school.
You had some different terms that you had to agree to. Would you be able to go into those?
With Ms. Geeta?
That's correct.
No, I think the only terms that we could term as trained. See, if you look at all our head of schools, we pay them market salary, and that's in record. We didn't pay her anything more than we paid. All right, so we paid her the same thing. The only request she had was that she would come in the month of April or something, work for a couple of weeks, and then go back to Finland, and that she would work from there, and then she'd come back and take over the school in August or something like that. I think that's the only concession we gave.
Right.
So I don't think we gave her anything more than what we gave Rupa Sen. And I think that was well in line with what we estimated to be what the market is demanding in terms of compensation.
Right.
So I don't think we gave her anything more or anything less at all. I think she got almost the same thing that Ms. Sen got.
So in terms of reference checks, because having worked in the corporate space myself, I know that deep reference checks are done for even, junior positions. So if you had a process of reference checks, would you be able to take us through it, please?
I think that's a great question, Bindu, and we got to say we got it wrong, because if I had to do a reference check for somebody that I was recruiting that I never knew, as you correctly said, we done a reference check of a previous employer. We done a reference check of teachers who worked with her in her past school. We have done a reference check in the larger market of indicators of integrity and honesty and character and so on and so forth. Right. In this case, I think it is overwhelmed by the fact that the previous chairman, Hanif, talked extraordinarily highly about her and said, if at all there was somebody being groomed for the future principal of the school, that was Geeta. We talked briefly to people who had served in legacy, and they spoke well of her and said she's a great person to work for. And then we talked off the record to some of the senior teachers inside the school, saying what they thought about her last tenure, and they said, wow, we love her so much. So did we do a reference check with the owner of legacy, which I should have? No, I didn't. Because we didn't think it was necessary, because everybody in the community of BIS knew her, had worked with her. Parents that were there for many years could vouch for her and said she's the greatest thing that happened to BIS since Adam leaves. So we just took it. Now, in hindsight, 2020, should we do that? The answer is no.
And what made you change your mind on this?
It's very difficult, Bindu, today in the BIS world, to decide who is for the school and who is not. It's become extremely difficult for me to say, hey, this person, I can vouch for it that he or she has the interest of the school at heart. I can only name a few because I know quite a few, but I know only a few very intimately. So all the references we got from all the people who told me they were great, today I wouldn't believe that. I would follow what I was taught in corporate life, and that we say, in God we trust, everything else we verify.
Right.
I think we made an exception here, and we allowed the heart to rule the head. We also were in a tearing hurry to find a replacement for our existing head of school at that point of time. And somebody came in and seemed to be so perfect that we said, wow, we can't go wrong on this one.
When did you sense that things were going wrong with Ms. Geeta from that January 26th event?
You see, in the very first couple of weeks, I told Yadav and I told my board that we need to be worried about Ms. Geeta because she seems to be so eager to be in the limelight all the time. I come from the school of there were three things that started to trigger my challenges. This is a matter of record. It was discussed in board meetings, and both Rishi and Vijay are privy to these discussions, where we took inventory of the head of school, and I laid out 3-4 things that I'm extremely worried about. Early days. The first thing I'm worried about is the fact that she seems to be the only thing that represents the school. I've worked with a lot of institutional builders, and they always told me that you have to choose either between building your name or building the institution. There's no middle path. And when I looked at her, she would be the only person representing the school in terms of awards, talking to the press, talking to CIS, talking to NIAS. It all seemed to be like a messiah that came, and I'm always worried about messiahs in the corporate life, in an institution.
Right.
These one-man armies tend to be destructive to organizations and institutions. That was my first problem. I said, watch out. We have somebody that's so keen to want to be in the limelight all the time. The second thing that worried me was the amount of time that head of school was spending to make herself being loved by parents across the school. The amount of hours she spent meeting parents, spending time with the parents in her room, talking to them, telling them how great the things were at school. That's the second thing to say. And the third was she shut the teaching community completely out from the board. We had a great relationship with the teaching community. We never ever told them how to teach, but we were always there to guide them, to counsel them, to support them, to encourage them. And from the time she came, there was not a single time she allowed us to talk to anybody. Nobody spoke to us. It was almost like a light switch had got turned off.
It's very, what you're saying is very startling and disturbing also.
It's almost like things were being built up, right? It's almost like the coins were being put on the chessboard, right? And the final thing that got me very worried was she started to reverse all of the changes that we've done in the school. policies were getting changed.
What do you mean?
Traditions were getting changed. Oh, yeah. She changed a whole bunch of policies. You can talk to Yadav and Rashmi, they'll probably be more detailed in terms of the actual things that she did. Many things got changed.
Could you give us a few examples, Edwin, if you don't mind?
Yeah, for example, she changed the entire leave policies for the teachers. She changed the working load for staff. Till the middle of January, I was extremely supportive to her. My first difference of opinion with the head of school came in when she told us that she needs a new head of department for math. I said, okay, go and hire one. Because I asked her at that time, does she have anybody inside the system that she could promote? She said, nobody fits the bill. I said, okay, hire. I'll support you. And suddenly she decided that CBS, who was the existing head of the department, would be the head of math. And when I looked at his qualifications, he did not meet the qualifications that we had put in place in the policy document on what should be for the head of school, because he didn't have the level of experience. I'm not against that. I asked her a very simple question. Now, this seems to have led to a serious difference of opinion between the secretary of the board, Yadav, and the principal, because Yadav was very clear, you can't do that. If you do that, you need to bring it to the board and we need to think about why you're going to make an exception to the rule.
Right.
And then we came to the board meeting, and in the board meeting, I asked her, I told her, there's nothing wrong in what you're doing, but I hope you understand the precedence of what you're doing. Because if you're going to promote somebody with 10 years of experience, then every teacher in the school with 10 years of experience is going to say, I need to be head of school. I need to be head of department. So you better be careful what you're doing. As long as you're sure, I'm fine.
Yeah.
She had to do it. Now, here's the funny part. I said, and this is my one-on-one conversation with head of school as the chairman mentoring my principal. I told her, see, at the end of the day, the final decision on who becomes the head of department is yours. My advice to you is always get the buy-in of the board. You don't have to do it, but it's a good thing to do it. And she said, I will not do that. This is my call. I let go, but for me, it was a red flag of things to come. It's almost like somebody was telling me, the school is my domain. I'd like authority. I don't need to be accountable to anybody.
Right.
I think those were the moments when things started to go down. That's the way I see it.